I will suspend the discussion in plenary, and we will move to the spotlight session on making returns sustainable and supporting reintegration in today's world, which will be moderated by the Assistant High Commissioner for Operations, Mr. Raouf Mazou. The High Commissioner for Refugees will introduce the spotlight session. High Commissioner, you have the floor.
Thank you, Ambassador. And I'll be very brief because I think we need to leave space to the spotlight session itself. Just to flag that once again, this is a very important topic. You will notice that in the description of the title, the word sustainable is included. I think this is one of the key words of this progress review, sustainability of responses. But perhaps there is nothing more important to sustain than the return of refugees or the displaced people when they go back to their homes. So this is really, because that means ending a refugee situation or a displacement situation. Therefore, I pass the floor to the Assistant High Commissioner for Operations, to Raouf Mazou, to moderate this very important session. Raouf, vous avez la parole.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just waiting for my co-panelists to sit. I think we're just waiting for Cameroon to join. Ambassador is arriving. Thank you, Chair, and welcome to this spotlight session on making returns sustainable and supporting reintegration in today's world. Between January and June 2025, nearly 2 million refugees and 5 million internally displaced persons returned to their home countries or places of origin, often under very challenging conditions. And these trends highlight the urgency and complexity of supporting voluntary, safe, and sustainable return, while development assistance in countries of origin remain limited. Today's session focuses on Objective 4 of the Global Compact on Refugees, strengthening conditions that enable refugees to return in safety and dignity. And we will explore how multi-stakeholder pledges at the global, regional, and country level on peace building, conflict prevention, housing, land and property rights, access to services, and economic opportunities have supported return. We will also explore how humanitarian, development, and peace actors can mobilize new commitments to respond to evolving situations. We will now hear from our distinguished speakers. His Excellency Ambassador Gustavo Adolfo Galón Giraldo, Permanent Representative of Colombia, will provide opening remarks. And then on the panel, we will have Ms. Nyakuma Peter Gatkwok-Riak, returnee and Executive Director of Together South Sudan, Mr. Saad Baroud, Director of the Department of International Organization and Conferences at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Expatriate of the Syrian Arab Republic, Ms. Shoko Noda, Assistant Administrator and Director, Crisis Bureau of UNDP, His Excellency Ambassador Salomon Ehet, Permanent Representative of the Republic of Cameroon to the United Nations, His Excellency Ambassador Musa Ali Megag, Director for Health and Social Development, Intergovernmental Authority on Development, IGAD, and my colleague, or my former colleague, Hendrika Ratwate, Deputy Special Representative of the Secretary General in Afghanistan. Mrs. Judith Mas, Head of the Division of Development, Approaches to Forced Displacement at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Netherlands, will offer closing remarks. Colombia has been a steadfast partner in promoting peace and advancing solutions. Excellency Ambassador Gustavo Adolfo Galón Geraldo, the floor is yours to deliver opening remarks.
Thank you. Thank you, dear Assistant High Commissioner Rauf Mazou, dear Filippo Grandi, High Commissioner, distinguished colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. It is an honor for Colombia to open this session on making returns sustainable and supporting reintegration in today's world. Colombia speaks to this discussion from a dual perspective. As a host country and as a country of return, shaped by decades of internal conflict, displacement, exile, and more recently, peace building and reconciliation. Our experience has taught us a fundamental lesson. Return is not an isolated act, but a long-term process, and its sustainability depends on whether it is voluntary, safe, dignified, and supported before, during, and after return. In this spirit, Colombia reaffirms that all return processes must fully respect international principles and human rights standards. Returns that are not voluntary, safe, and dignified cannot be sustainable, and they risk undermining trust, social cohesion, and peace. Allow me to briefly share Colombia's experience. Our return policy, established through national legislation more than a decade ago, was initially designed for voluntary return after long migratory cycles abroad. However, its implementation has evolved. Today, it also responds to the realities of refugees, exiles, and other vulnerable returnees, demonstrating the importance of flexible, adaptive, and inclusive frameworks. We have learned that sustainability begins before return by strengthening ties with the diaspora, treating all nationals abroad with dignity regardless of status, promoting cultural identity, supporting diaspora organizations, and building trust through consular engagement and access to national institutions. It continues during return by ensuring accessible procedures, clear information, logistical support, and incentives that empower returnees, not merely to relocate, but to return with purpose, skills, and opportunities. And it is ultimately test after arrival through sustainable reintegration by guaranteeing access to public services, livelihoods, entrepreneurship, and coordinated institutional support at both national and local levels. This is where reintegration and peace building become inseparable. Sustainable reintegration requires investments not only in economic opportunities, but also in trust building, social cohesion, inclusive governance, and reconciliation. In this regard, Colombia's commitment extends beyond borders. As co-convener of the multi-stakeholder pledge on peace building and conflict prevention under the Global Compact on Refugees, together with Egypt and Norway, Colombia has worked to translate pledges into concrete action. Through symbolic reparations and recognition of Colombian refugees and exiles abroad, particularly here in Geneva, we are implementing recommendations of our Truth Commission and acknowledging state responsibility, victims' dignity, and the central role of peace in durable solutions. These efforts reaffirm our conviction that peace is not only an outcome, but a foundation for sustainable return and reintegration. Finally, Colombia encourages open dialogue, exchange of best practices, and strengthened partnerships among states, international organizations, civil society, and affected communities. Only through collective action can we assure that return contributes not to renewed vulnerability, but to reconciliation, development, and lasting peace. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ambassador, for the opening remarks. I will start with Ms. Nyakuma. Based on your experience as a returnee and now leading together South Sudan, how can returnees and refugee-led civil society organizations be more meaningfully included in national peace-building and reintegration strategies? What mechanisms or practices have you seen or would recommend ensuring their voices shape decisions, including on broader recovery efforts in countries of origin? You have the floor.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. As you have heard, I'm Nyakuma Peter. I'm a returnee in South Sudan. I'm a South Sudanese. And I'm the founder and the executive director of Together South Sudan. Let me go direct to the point. As returnees, our message is clear that inclusion must move beyond consultation to shared decision-making. Returnees are often asked for inputs after they have already been met. What works better are formal co-governance mechanisms where returnee and refugee-led organizations have real seats and voting power in peace building, reintegration, and recovery bodies, and where their inputs must be reflected or formally addressed. Secondly, returnees must be recognized as political social actors, not just beneficiaries. Many bring skills like mediations, education, health, and local governance. When returnees are supported as implementers and as mediators and as peace actors, ownership and legitimacy increase. The third point is direct and flexible funding is essential for refugee and returnees-led organizations. To often exclude simply because they cannot access funding, the returnees themselves and the refugees, without core and direct funding, participation remains symbolic. Inclusion must be institutionalized at both national and local levels. Reintegration happens locally, linking national peace processes to county and community levels. Structures led by returnees make peace effort credible and grounded. Reintegration cannot focus only on livelihood, according to us, the forcefully displaced people. Returnees consistently stress the need to address land rights, documentations, political participation, and transitional justice. Economic recovery without rights is fragile. And finally, long-term partnership matters more than one-off consultations. Multi-year engagement and mutual accountability and respect for existing capacities build lasting trust. My organization, the Together South Sudan, had pledged the support on capacity building and local reconciliation initiatives at the grassroots levels. And my personal message I said this message in 2023, but I want to call again. The world cannot afford to wait. Leaders and nations fueling conflicts must confront the root causes now. People are being driven from their homes, stripped of their rights, and forced to flee simply to survive. This must end. Every person deserves safety, dignity, and freedom in their own country, now and not someday. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Nyakoma, for a very clear message emphasizing on the need for meaningful participation, inclusion of communities, and of course for your call to action. Mr. Bahoud, from your government perspective, what are the most critical elements needed to ensure that return is voluntary, safe, and sustainable? And how is the government working to create conditions conducive to return, reintegration, and to rebuild trust within returning communities? And you have the floor.
Well, thank you very much. And I guess the first question is, looking at Syria, we have half of the population being displaced, either internally or externally. That's a lot of number that we need to deal with. So returnee is not a marginal number of people, it's half of the population. And the first thing that we need to do is security. People need to feel safe in Syria, and I guess liberation, and we are marking the first anniversary of liberation in Syria. Liberation from Assad government, a brutal government who has held people hostages and bombardment cities and creating cracks deep down in our society. That was the first thing to be done, at least to ensure that when people come to Syria, when returnees want to come to Syria, when IDPs return to their original home, they're safe to do so. The lists of people on wanted list have been unending lists, and all these lists have been abolished. That's in terms of finding basic safety. That's why we have, despite the very deteriorating economic situation in Syria, 3 million have already returned out of the big numbers we have. Then we have to deal with the internal displacement. The refugees from abroad will look at the internal displaced people and say, if they are returning, I'm returning. So the first thing that we're trying to do is zero tent policy. We cannot afford having free Syria, new Syria, while people still live in a fabric tent. And no one of you will ever feel this is a dignified living condition. So that's a must. Then from rights point of view, the Syrian government has ensured the right of people to return. That means they have right to access to documentation, right to access to house, land, and property, right access for unregistered children to be registered. That's a very challenging mission, but it's on the track. The things that we cannot do for refugees yet, and that's where we look at the sustainable component, is economic recovery. And the government's first priority for our foreign ministry was removing sanctions. We need a healthy economy. We need that economy to be based on investments. We don't need that economy to be based on charity, because there's no charity enough in the world for a population. So we are so glad that the removal of sanctions is on track. We still have things to be done. And we are inviting foreign investment in Syria. And that's how we inform, that's how we do the volunteer, sustainable thing. Last part will be rebuilding, reconstruction. We have a huge mission ahead of us. Assad has wiped 1/3 of the housing in Syria. So without proper housing, education, hospitals, and access to income-generating mechanisms, including agriculture, industry, basic services, we are working day and night to do a viable economy, but we need the international support, and that's why we pledged we have provided, Syria has provided for the first time yesterday the pledge to work with the international community. We are working with UNHCR, with international donors, to provide these infrastructure that will require, that will be the basis for securing basic human rights for anybody who's thinking to return in Syria.
Thank you very much, Mr. Baroud. Security, rights, economic recovery, and thanks a lot also, and congratulations for the pledge. And you will get the support from the international community to make sure that the return takes place voluntarily and in conditions of safety and dignity. Now I turn to Ms. Shoko Noda. From UNDP's perspective, what are the most critical elements required to ensure that reintegration support is sustainable and linked to broader development frameworks at the country level, including through strong humanitarian development and peace nexus approaches? Could you share a concrete example where this nexus has worked well in practice? You have the floor.
Yes? Oh, clock started. Okay, but I just want to say one thing. It's honored to be on the same stage as you, Filippo. Thank you very, very much for your inspiring leadership. And you have always made us and made me personally to be proud to be part of UN and UN staff. So we'll miss you very much, but thank you so much. And then responding to you, Raouf, thank you for inviting us. From UNDP's perspective, there are 3 important points. One, we have to have even stronger humanitarian development peace nexus. It will be 10 years next year after the nexus concept emerged after the humanitarian summit in Istanbul, and it's very important to focus on those connections. Second, nationally led system is the key for reintegration, and third is financing. I just came back from Afghanistan, and I feel like I'm still there. It was a very memorable, and then also, I mean, really, how do you say, the difficult situation. Really thank Indrika for your leadership. That's where we have 2.3 million people returned only in 2025. And I met a woman in Jalalabad who told me that we need income. She needs income. She is just with children, and she needs a chance to rebuild the life with the new environment. So UNDP is working with local communities, with all the partners, and really promoting area-based recoveries. There's never a good moment to start so-called more development-oriented recovery work, but we have to just start and make sure that those returnees become self-reliant. And then returnees should not be seen as a burden to the society, but they bring their own skills. They should be reintegrated, and their skills should be fully utilized. UNDP also co-leads 6 out of 7 regional durable solution working group with UNHCR, and then really promoting this HDP nexus and bridging between the immediate support to also a more longer-term basic human needs. National-led system is also very, very important. We have seen, Raouf, we traveled to Nigeria, Ethiopia, where we saw the national global solution strategies. The leadership at the national level is extremely important. And then lastly, the financing, and also to engage the private sector more proactively to make sure that there is a conducive economic environment for all the returnees or refugees to again contribute. We all know that ODS architecture is evolving, changing, and in that sense, we also need a new partnership model to move forward. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Ms. Noda, for highlighting the critical role of government ownership, leadership, and development-oriented approaches in making the return sustainable, and the point that you made on private sector, which is, I think, extremely important. Excellency Ambassador Solomon Ehet, drawing on Cameroon's experience. What are the key lessons which have emerged on aligning national strategies, donor support, and community priorities to advance sustainable return and reintegration for refugees and IDPs? And how can these different layers of support be better coordinated to ensure sustainable outcomes? And you have the floor.
Thanks so much for giving me the floor to share the experience of my country. I'm happy to be here with the High Commissioner. Please let me switch in French. Le Cameroun, pays hôte d'1 million de réfugiés, reste fermement attaché aux principes prônés par le Pacte mondial sur les réfugiés, dont celui sur le rapatriement libre dans la sécurité et la dignité. À cet égard, mon pays a diversifié ses initiatives, tant au plan national, au plan frontalier, et renforcé le caractère durable du retour, tout en contribuant à la réintégration des réfugiés dans leur pays d'origine. Au plan national, le Cameroun poursuit ses efforts à l'effet de renforcer, durant l'asile, les capacités de résilience et d'autonomisation des réfugiés. Ces efforts visent essentiellement à éduquer et à former les réfugiés, suivant leurs références à des métiers lucratifs susceptibles de favoriser l'autonomisation, non seulement au Cameroun, mais aussi dans le pays d'origine. En outre, le gouvernement du Cameroun veille à s'assurer du caractère volontaire du retour à travers des activités régulières de collecte des volontés éventuelles de retour, préalables, incontournables à toute activité de rapatriement. En ce sens, les réfugiés candidats volontaires au retour sont enregistrés et inclus dans les procédures irrelatives. Au plan frontalier, le Cameroun ne ménage aucun effort pour impliquer les pays d'origine des réfugiés dans leur préparation, la planification et la mise en œuvre des opérations de rapatriement. Ces efforts menés conjointement avec les pays hôtes visent à institutionnaliser des cadres de concertation avec les pays impulsés dans la signature des accords. C'est ainsi que le Cameroun a signé des accords tripartites avec la République centrafricaine, par exemple, avec la République fédérale du Nigeria, pays d'origine des réfugiés majoritairement recensés au Cameroun. Ces accords consolidés d'accords partis permettent à mon pays d'adresser, de concert avec les autorités de ces pays, les défis liés au retour à la réintégration et plus précisément, ils favorisent la tenue des rencontres de partage et de suivi des initiatives menées dans les localités de retour pour une réintégration durable. Bien plus, ces rencontres constituent souvent des espaces de décision d'organisation de go and see comme en tel. Ces visites effectuées par les réfugiés dans les localités retour permettent d'apprécier sur le terrain les efforts consentis par leurs autorités d'origine en faveur de la paix, la stabilité, la réintégration des réfugiés dans leurs localités de retour. Ces dispositifs appuyés par le HCR ont favorisé, au cours de l'année écoulée, le retour à la réintégration durable de près de 12 200 réfugiés centrafricains dans leur pays d'origine. Ils permettent également d'envisager le rapatriement de 20 000 réfugiés nigérians tels que convenu avec les autorités nigérianes. Bien que consolider la mise en œuvre de ces différents mécanismes se heurte parfois à quelques difficultés, quelques défis, dont les plus saillants restent le financement de ces activités. Aussi, les rencontres tripartites ou de groupes de travail créés à l'échelle nationale, moins fréquents qu'initialement, impactent parfois la célérité des opérations retour. Finalement, la qualité de coopération entre le Cameroun, pays d'origine, le HCR, facilite toutefois l'identification des solutions subsidiaires pour une poursuite effective des démarches visant à assurer le retour et la réintégration durable des réfugiés. Voilà ce que je peux dire par rapport à cette question. Merci beaucoup.
Well, thank you very much, Ambassador. And I mean, what I retain from what you said is also the importance of the tripartite agreements. You concluded a number of tripartite agreements with neighboring countries, and this is the framework which have helped ensure that the return takes place in conditions of safety and dignity and is voluntary. Now I turn to IGAD and Excellency Ambassador Musa Ali Megag. How is IGAD promoting regional cooperation to address the cross-border dimension of displacement and reintegration, including through IGAD's multi-stakeholder pledge on beyond borders, beyond barriers, delivering comprehensive solution in the IGAD region, and what regional frameworks or initiatives are proving the most effective in supporting countries of origin and return? You have the floor.
Merci beaucoup. Bonsoir à tout le monde. L'autorité intergouvernementale pour le développement et ses États membres reconnaissent que le déplacement dépasse souvent les frontières nationales et nécessite une approche régionale pour résoudre les conflits et poursuivre des solutions globales. La région IGAD compte l'une des plus fortes concentrations de populations déplacées. Actuellement, la région IGAD accueille plus de 25 millions de personnes déplacées, dont plus de 6 millions de réfugiés et demandeurs d'asile, ainsi que plus de 19 millions de personnes déplacées internes. Malgré l'ampleur du défi du déplacement, couplé à la diminution des fonds pour le développement et l'aide humanitaire, les États membres de l'IGAD continuent de maintenir une politique de porte ouverte envers les réfugiés et ont pris plusieurs engagements pour poursuivre des solutions durables pour les réfugiés et les autres populations déplacées. Depuis 2017, les États membres de l'IGAD adoptent une approche régionale pour trouver des solutions durables pour la population déplacée et leur communauté d'accueil. Cela faisait suite au sommet spécial de mars 2017 sur les solutions durables pour les réfugiés somaliens et la réintégration des rapatriés en Somalie. Le sommet a reconnu la nature régionale des impacts et des solutions au déplacement et a appelé à un cadre renforcé pour l'intégration et la coopération régionale. Depuis, la déclaration a été étendue au-delà de la Somalie pour répondre à toutes les situations de réfugiés dans la région de l'IGAD. Permettez-moi de mettre en avant 4 mécanismes principaux qui guident nos approches. Premièrement, l'IGAD a mené le développement des cadres régionaux de déplacement et d'instruments politiques qui encouragent l'harmonisation de principes et normes d'asile, de protection, de retour et de réintégration entre les États membres. Cela crée une base normative commune pour l'action transfrontalière. Les cadres politiques de l'IGAD sur les solutions durables découlent des engagements pris dans la déclaration de Nairobi de 2017 et son plan d'action sur les solutions durables pour les réfugiés somaliens et la réintégration des retours. La déclaration appelait à un renforcement de la coopération régionale et à des solutions élargies, y compris un engagement accru des acteurs de développement. Les engagements de la déclaration de Nairobi ont depuis été étendus pour couvrir toutes les populations concernées de la région IGAD et traduits en déclarations thématiques et plans d'action sur l'éducation, la santé, l'emploi, les moyens de subsistance et l'autonomie. De plus, en 2023, les États membres de l'IGAD ont adopté les cadres politiques de l'IGAD sur la protection des réfugiés. Le cadre précise explicitement que l'un des principaux domaines de coopération est de faciliter les rapatriements et la réintégration des réfugiés, des rapatriés et des personnes déplacées en coopération avec les organisations gouvernementales et non gouvernementales concernées conformément aux instruments nationaux, régionaux et internationaux. Deuxièmement, en 2020, l'IGAD et les membres du groupe central de la plateforme de l'IGAD, dont l'Union européenne, l'Allemagne, la Banque mondiale, les HCR et le PNUD, ont lancé l'initiative Solutions pour les Soudans et les Soudans du Sud, avant de galvaniser une réponse collective plus forte, afin de créer des conditions favorables au rapatriement volontaire, à l'intégration locale et à la réinstallation aux voies complémentaires, ainsi que pour renforcer l'asile en s'adressant à l'humanitaire, les besoins liés au développement et à la paix dans les communautés touchées par les déplacements forcés au Soudan et au Soudan du Sud et en provenance du Soudan toujours. L'initiative visait à soutenir la mise en œuvre des dispositions durables relatives aux solutions des accords de paix respectifs des deux pays. Elle complète également les efforts collectifs pour relancer les économies des deux pays. L'initiative Solutions apporte un large éventail de problématiques et des besoins dans les zones d'accueil et de retour des réfugiés et des personnes déplacées internes, notamment renforcement des cadres juridiques, institutionnels et politiques, renforcer la protection, la cohésion sociale, la sécurité et l'état des droits, soutenir des programmes communautaires dans la région visant à renforcer la résilience en soutenant l'éducation, la santé, le lavage, les moyens, la santé, le lavage, les moyens de subsistance, la gouvernance locale, le logement, les terres et les biens, ainsi que la réhabilitation environnementale. Renforcer l'enregistrement, les données et les preuves pour orienter les solutions. La mitigation, adaptation au genre et au changement climatique sont également considérés comme des domaines transversaux d'intérêt. Grâce à cette initiative de solutions, le gouvernement du Soudan du Sud a élaboré et adopté une stratégie et un plan d'action nationaux durables qui, malgré les contextes difficiles, offrent un cadre pour les leaderships gouvernementaux afin de mener des solutions durables. Troisièmement, l'IGAD apporte un soutien technique aux États membres pour la conception des stratégies nationales, des réintégrations, des politiques d'intégration locale et des programmes de stabilisation communautaire. En Somalie et au Soudan du Sud, l'IGAD, en collaboration avec d'autres acteurs, a soutenu le développement des stratégies nationales, des solutions durables et la création d'un secrétariat national pour les solutions durables. Les stratégies et secrétariats servent de cadre institutionnel qui coordonne les efforts entre diverses agences gouvernementales, partenaires internationaux et communautés locales afin d'assurer une mise en œuvre cohérente et efficace du politique de réintégration. Enfin, l'IGAD a créé un groupe de travail sur les données de déplacement, une initiative collaborative visant à harmoniser et améliorer la collecte et l'utilisation des données sur les déplacements dans toute la région de l'IGAD. Les efforts du groupe de travail sont soutenus par divers partenaires au développement et visent à établir un cadre régional consolidé de surveillance pour les rapports des États membres. Elle offre une plateforme essentielle aux États membres pour partager leurs expertises, apprendre les uns des autres et combler les lacunes de manière collaborative, ce qui profite finalement à la gouvernance et à l'élaboration des politiques de la région. De manière générale, notre expérience montre que les cadres initiatives les plus efficaces partagent des caractéristiques communes, notamment l'adhésion politique des États membres, la capacité de coordination opérationnelle et un engagement étroit avec les acteurs concernés, y compris les autorités locales, les communautés et les réfugiés eux-mêmes. Malgré ces succès, nous faisons encore face à d'importants défis et à des lacunes. Permettez-moi d'en souligner quelques-uns. Premièrement, la mise en œuvre des engagements politiques et cadres convenus reste faible. J'en ai fini. Une politique régionale harmonisée ne se traduit pas toujours par une pratique nationale en raison de la capacité, de la volonté politique ou des manques de ressources. Deuxièmement, la réintégration nécessite des investissements à moyen et long terme, souvent sous-financés. Troisièmement, il existe encore une barrière importante dans la documentation et le partage des données, en raison de la protection des données et des considérations de confidentialité, d'interopérabilité et des sensibilités politiques. Quatrièmement, les retours sont entravés par des menaces de sécurité non résolues, des litiges de propriété ou un manque de reconnaissance légale des terrains ou de l'identité. De plus, sans inclusion délibérée des communautés d'accueil, le retour accentue souvent les tensions en raison de la concurrence pour les ressources limitées. Je vais m'arrêter là, j'ai quelques petites idées encore, mais je suis vraiment désolé, j'ai été forcé de partager l'expérience de l'IGAD parce que c'est la région qui abrite la plus forte communauté des réfugiés, des déplacés et des droits d'asile. Merci beaucoup de votre patience.
Je vous remercie. Je vous remercie. Je vais maintenant donner la parole à M. Ratouaté. But I will switch to English, don't worry. Mr. Atwate, in the context of Afghanistan, what are the key challenges and opportunities in ensuring that returns are voluntary, safe, dignified, and sustainable? And how can national authorities, UN agencies, and partners work together to create conditions that uphold these principles while supporting sustainable reintegration? You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Rauf. I think in terms of the context in Afghanistan, we've had multiple shocks. This year alone, 2.5 million Afghans have returned back. And if you look at the last 2 years, in 24 months, we've had 4.5 million Afghans coming back. That's a 10% increase in the population of the country. Even a country that has the infrastructure and capacities would be stretched in this context. We've also had droughts and then multiple shocks in terms of a huge funding crisis, which has taken 35% of the overall budget for humanitarian and development out of the equation. So in that context, we are also looking at a country which, due to the restrictions of the de facto authorities on women and girls, constrains the space for half the population to be meaningfully engaged. So in this context, I think, as you said, how does one ensure return and reintegration in a principled manner? One challenge is also where you have had the host countries, which have for 40 years plus being generous hosts to millions of Afghans, feeling the pressure on their economies, the impact overall. And you hear the call from the host countries saying the burden sharing, which was demonstrated before, has diminished, resources have diminished. So how do you protect that, have the protection space for those in need of protection? I think 3 lessons here in terms of the principal advocacy. The international community, member states have to still, I think, demonstrate equitable burden sharing, where decades of hospitality have been demonstrated. Using platforms like the regional platform, the solution strategy for Afghan refugees, the support platform, etc., to generate advocacy and resources is important. And then supporting host countries to look at migration management on one side and having a protection safety net that those in need of international protection are identified and supported. And I think that advocacy has to continue in a context where we have diminishing resources and political willingness. On coordination, I think national partners, international partners, and as Ms. Nekuma said, meaningful inclusion of refugee and returnee voices is incredibly important. And therein, I think, for sustainable reintegration comes the importance of data. Using data on returns, on return areas, channeling that with development initiatives and humanitarian initiatives, bringing in international financial institutions. The World Bank and ADB are contributing a lot in the context of Afghanistan, vertical funds which help access to services. I'm pleased to report that in UNHCR, in the pledges for Afghanistan on basic services, 80 million has been committed to about 6.8 million beneficiaries. On livelihoods, about 30 million for over 600,000 beneficiaries, and a primary focus on returnees, where over 7 million individuals have benefited, including 1 million returnees. So I think this is the way to bring in the private sector, development actors, and the humanitarian in a nexus approach. And through the private sector, I think we can also bring in the gender dimensions for women-led enterprises. And as our colleague from UNDP was saying, very importantly, bringing that economic growth into the communities. Lastly, I think the concept of partnership has to, even in these challenging circumstances, engage in a principled manner the de facto authorities. One cannot have meaningful engagement on solutions, advocacy, and rights without their meaningful engagement. And I think there to be risk-aware, but not risk-averse in how we engage with the authorities, and the international community also supporting these initiatives in a bold manner and a pragmatic and principled manner. Thank you.
No, thank you very much, Indrika. Thank you very much for highlighting the scale and complexity of displacement and returns in Afghanistan and the importance of coordinated, principled, and community-based reintegration efforts, and your emphasis on the link between humanitarian development and peace initiative. And, of course, the reference that you made to the private sector is also extremely important. I'll now move to featured statement of support on behalf of the multi-stakeholder pledges. And I will give the floor first to South Sudan, then to NRC, then to UN Habitat, then to the Inter-American Development Bank, and then to ILO. So I'll start with South Sudan, and please be mindful of the time. We have to conclude this session by 6 o'clock. Honorable Kyoka Bol Kuyok, Minister of General Education and Instruction, you have the floor.
Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, this discussion comes at a critical moment requiring renewed thinking on both programming and responsibility sharing, as displacement driven by conflict and climate continues to rise globally. South Sudan faces compounded pressures, shrinking humanitarian resources, persistent internal displacement, and the dual reality of being both a refugee-producing and refugee-hosting country with over 600,000 refugees, primarily from Sudan. Despite these constraints, South Sudan has launched the Durable Solutions Strategy and the Action Plan on Return, Reintegration, and Recovery 2024 to 2028 to guide safe, voluntary return and sustainable reintegration. Since the Sudan crisis, we have maintained an open-door policy, guaranteed prima facie refugee status, and supported reception, registration, and onward assistance, while advancing reintegration of returnees through civil documentation, access to land, and community-based solutions. Integrated settlements, such as will demonstrate impact, but needs continue to outpace available resources amid severe funding shortfalls affecting partners, including UNHCR. We call on development actors to invest in large-scale integration, enablers, roads, inclusive governance, and rule of law infrastructure. We urge the private sector to expand engagement in livelihoods, agri-business, and digital connectivity to generate jobs and market access. Through our enabling policy environment, we appeal to donors and partners to match pledges with financing for education, vocational training, basic services, and development-led livelihoods and financial inclusion, while strengthening local authorities. South Sudan remains committed to its pledges and stands ready to work with partners to transform displacement into resilient opportunity and peace. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister. And I'm now going to give the floor to Cecilia Rosselli, who is the Director, Policy and Advocacy and NRC Geneva Director. You have the floor.
Thank you. I hope you don't mind. I've moved from my assigned seat, so to be closer. And thank you for this opportunity to flag the importance of housing, land, and property rights to enable safe, dignified, and sustainable return. The multi-stakeholder pledge co-convened by NRC, UNHCR, and UN Habitat is a vital step toward ensuring the housing, land, and property rights are fully recognized as central to safe return, reintegration, and long-term stability for displaced people. These rights are not a technical detail. They are the foundation for recovery, protection, and dignity, as highlighted today by Ms. Nyakuma from South Sudan and then by the representative from South Sudan again. The Norwegian Refugee Council is fully committed to advancing HLP rights. We work closely with UN Habitat and UNHCR in the multi-stakeholder working group and have provided HLP legal assistance to over 950,000 people. We support authorities across Africa, the Middle East, Asia, and Latin America to strengthen HLP governance. And we also contribute with evidence, research, and policy guidance at global, regional, and national levels. 15 member states have made HLP-specific pledges so far, an encouraging start, but far from being sufficient. With Germany, Slovenia, and UN Habitat having completed their pledges, we see that measurable progress is possible. As we look toward 2026, we have an opportunity to move from isolated efforts to coordinated collective action. We encourage UNHCR to strengthen its leadership on this and that the new member states will join their 15 peers in making HLP a priority. Durable solution cannot be achieved without addressing HLP rights. We have heard it several times today. These rights underpin recovery, economic stability, and development, and they do not stop at the end of an emergency phase. They extend throughout the displacement cycle. In today's context of prioritized humanitarian aid, stronger coordination with development and rule of law actors is essential. We see this clearly in Afghanistan, where displacement and rapid urban growth require long-term investments in land administration and planning. In Syria, as already well pointed out today, where widespread destruction and complex claims demand sustained support to rebuild inclusive institutions. And in Cameroon, thanks, Ambassador, for flagging this, where host communities need strengthened governance, services, and secure tenure to support both displaced and local communities. Humanitarian actors cannot do this alone. Governments, local institutions, and development and rule of law actors must step in earlier, stay longer, and work in true partnership. We have some clear asks that we want to put forward, but most importantly, securing HLP rights is not optional. It is the cornerstone of durable solution. It is a shared responsibility across the humanitarian and development spectrum, and together we can turn commitment into concrete, lasting change for displaced communities. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ms. Rosselli. I'll now give the floor to Dr. Graham Alabaster, who is the head of the Geneva office at UN Habitat. You have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Excellencies, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for the opportunity to speak at this important high-level spotlight event. UN Habitat strongly supports to make return sustainable and reintegration effective. At the heart of this is securing housing, land and property rights, because without secure access to land and housing, voluntary, safe and dignified return cannot be achieved. Since the Global Refugee Forum in 2023, we've seen an encouraging momentum in advancing HLP rights as a cornerstone of durable solutions. However, challenges remain. Legal, institutional, operational barriers continue to prevent displaced populations and returnees from accessing secure tenure, which is essential for reintegration, economic recovery and stability. UN Habitat remains fully committed to securing the HLP rights of forcibly displaced populations and refugees. In our 2023 pledge in support of the multi-stakeholder pledge on durable solutions through secure housing, land and property rights, we committed to the following. Firstly, to raising awareness on how addressing land-related root causes of conflict and protecting HLP rights is critical for durable solutions and peace. Secondly, on building capacity across our global network to identify and address HLP issues. Thirdly, to support countries to protect displaced persons' HLP rights along with those of host communities and facilitate access to land and housing for refugees and returnees. And finally, of course, to mobilize resources to scale up some of these impactful strategies. Since then, we've worked with government, civil society and our other partners to strengthen land governance and implement practical targeted interventions aimed at securing HLP rights of displaced people. In Iraq, we provided legal assistance to over 1,000 returnee households. In Inoa, issued occupancy certificates, supported compensation claims, and strengthened the capacity of local authorities and NGOs to protect the HLP rights of returnees. In Iraq and Lebanon, we have collected the HLP claims and supporting evidence for over 70,000 Syrian refugees to support efforts inside Syria to repossess properties illegally occupied, transacted or destroyed, or to claim compensation. In Syria, we restored cadastral services and digitized HLP records to help displaced individuals and returnees reclaim lost documentation and to promote the recognition of informal HLP rights. In Pakistan, we are working to improve the living conditions of both refugees and host communities in urban slums by addressing tenure insecurity, improving housing conditions, and promoting inclusive urban development and peaceful coexistence. In Afghanistan, we've implemented integrated gender-responsive and climate-resilient HLP programs in areas of return, mapping of communal land rights and plot boundaries, and developing participatory settlement plans. These are just some of the efforts we've made. And in conclusion, as we look ahead, UN Habitat reaffirms its unwavering commitment to the multi-stakeholder pledge on durable solutions through secure housing and land and property rights. We'll continue to champion secure HLP rights as a foundation for voluntary, safe and dignified return, reintegration, inclusion and peace, working with partners to ensure that HLP remains central to the humanitarian development peace nexus. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Graham Alabasta. I'll now give the floor to Mr. Felipe Munoz, the head of the migration unit at the Inter-American Development Bank. Felipe, you have the floor.
Thank you, Raouf. It's a pleasure for the IDB to have this space and be able to speak of Latin America and the Caribbean, a region that is facing multiple and overlapping migration challenges, and in the last year, especially the returnees. Just 3 examples for you. The returnees since 2020 to North and Central America count for more than 670,000 people, and just this year, more than 75,000 people, and of course, it's possible to increase. And to Haiti, just this year, more than 240,000 people have been returned to Haiti. Then we have a very complex scenario, not to name to another returnees to Colombia, Ecuador, Mexico, and to other countries. We, from the Inter-American Development Bank, have approved 3 operations in Honduras, a labor markets operation where we include some non-reimbursable resources to guarantee that some returnees are included, but also 2 operations, one in Honduras and one in El Salvador with the education system to help in this government as well to reintegrate the children that to the education system. And also with technical cooperations, we have been working to increase the institutional capacity of these countries to receive to the reception and reintegration to these returnees with the support of the government of Canada. And we are working tirelessly with Haiti, trying to help them to build some institutional capacity. Let me conclude with some personal note. 9 years ago, I had the honor to receive the High Commissioner in Cúcuta when I was part of the government of Colombia. Cúcuta is the border city between Colombia and Venezuela. And in 2018 was the time when began the movement, the forced displacement of more than 3 million Venezuelan people to Colombia, just not to name 2 other countries in Latin America. And since that time, and now in my capacity as a migration unit chief, I want to thank you for your leadership, for the team in UNHCR in Latin America, because we have built a very, very strong partnership with UNHCR, and working along your inspiring leadership is an honor. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Felipe. I'll now give the floor to Ms. Gladys Cisneros, Chief of the Labor Migration Branch at ILO. You have the floor.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, Excellencies. Surveys consistently show that after safety and shelter, access to employment is the top factor influencing refugees' decision to return. Employment is not only key to livelihoods, it's a central pillar of sustainable reintegration, reducing the risk of poverty and secondary displacement. Job-rich recovery is thus not optional. It's essential for durable solutions. As technical co-convener of the Economic Inclusion and Social Protection Pledge, and guided by its normative mandate and humanitarian development peace nexus approach, the ILO supports constituents in designing coherent policies and building inclusive labor markets, ensuring recovery efforts are immediate, but also that they're transformative and sustainable. Much of the work to promote labor market inclusion in host countries also applies in context of return, paving the way for successful and lasting reintegration. Jobs must be decent, providing fair wages, safe working conditions, and social protection, while building on returnees' skills through recognition and portability of qualifications and acquired rights. Through the Prospects Opportunity Fund, the ILO works with partners to advance durable solutions sustainable return, and regional mobility. In East Africa, for example, this includes strengthening systems for skills recognition, developing portable credentials, and supporting benefit portability. In the Arab States regions, Rights at Work awareness will also be conducted with initiatives that prioritize women, youth, and informal workers, expanding access to employment, to social protection, financial inclusion, and market-driven training, all while fostering social cohesion. In response to the pressure that return movements have placed on the fragile Syrian labor market, the ILO has rapidly scaled up its program of support, delivering tangible results. 36,000 decent workdays created in Aleppo through employment-intensive recovery projects. The first labor force survey since the conflict launched with national partners. Skills profiling of 5,000 returnees, and textile sector revitalization is underway. Working with the Ministry of Social Affairs and Labor, with social partners and UN agencies, the ILO is laying foundations for inclusive employment, for rights-based social protection, and stronger labor governance. The ILO is also developing a regional framework for inclusive return, reintegration, recovery, and decent work in Syria and neighboring countries that sets out a strategic vision and a coordinated plan to address displacement-related labor market transitions while supporting sustainable economic recovery and social justice across the region. This builds on the tripartite meeting held in Damascus last October, which reaffirmed the importance of cooperation for labor market recovery in Syria and its neighboring countries. In 2025, under the ILO Regional Strategy of Labor Migration and Human Mobility in Latin America and the Caribbean, the ILO has also supported Latin American countries in developing the Plus Erice strategy with UN partners. This strategy will promote socioeconomic integration of refugees, of migrants, of refugees and asylum seekers, strengthening government gender-responsive approaches, and monitoring of reintegration outcomes. When returnees and communities have equal access to decent work, everyone benefits. Strengthening labor protection and cooperation is not just a policy choice. This is the path through which we build cohesion, resilience, and lasting peace. And this is quite the opportune moment to scale up our joint effort to ensure strong labor protections and meaningful economic inclusion for returnees to help build peaceful societies. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Cisneros. Now we're going to move to the closing remarks by Netherlands. And I would like to thank all those on the panel for your very insightful comments, recommendation, and for the hope that you're giving to a number of refugees around the world, and particularly, I would say, Syria, because this is the return operation that is now taking place, and we are all, as you've heard, supporting you in these efforts. Ms. Maas, Netherlands financial, technical, and other support and advocacy at the global stage to make returns sustainable for refugees and IDPs has been instrumental. The floor is yours for your reflection and closing remarks.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, panelists, for your valuable contributions. And I would like to start by acknowledging the diversity of perspectives shared by governments, regional bodies, IFIs, the UN, civil societies, returnees themselves. These insights shape a shared understanding of sustainable return and reintegration. Just to highlight a few remarks that really stood out for me. So Mrs. Nyakumas, she was highlighting the role of refugees themselves in the process of return. She said reintegration occurs locally, emphasizing the value of community dialogue spaces bringing together returnees, host communities and authorities to build trust and jointly set priorities. This was also a crucial element of the whole of society approach that Mr. Baroud referred to in his intervention on Syria. He mentioned security as his first priority. And his second priority wasn't charity, but he asked for investments to rebuild his country. Ms. Noda stressed the importance of area-based programming that benefits both returnees and host communities. This is key to avoid tensions in communities where often most people face significant needs, irrespective of if they are refugee returnees, IDP returnees, of those who had not been displaced at all. His Excellency, the Ambassador of Cameroon, rightly stressed the need for coordinating mechanisms with his neighboring countries and at different levels to ensure the effectiveness of a multi-stakeholder approach. I also noted that he highlighted the go and see approach, which could be a best practice for other countries too. The multi-stakeholder approach also stretched to the regional level, as we heard from His Excellency Dr. Wogney, who outlined how the IGAD support platform supports coordination among countries of origin, asylum and return, and addresses cross-border challenges. In some cases, the coordination regards political advocacy with neighboring countries that is critical to ensure that cross-border population movement uphold the principles of voluntariness, safety and dignity. Mr. Radwatwe shared his insight on his work in Afghanistan, on how to promote predictable human approaches for Afghans. As the current chair of the Solution Strategy for Afghan Refugees platform, I acknowledge the challenges that UNAMA is facing. I would like to take this opportunity to reaffirm the Netherlands' support and commitments in support of voluntary returns and reintegration. This is a key element of our strategy of developmental approaches to forced displacement. When the opportunity arises for voluntarily and sustainable returns to the country of origin, this is not only a chance of a durable solutions for the refugee involved. It's also key to maintain the protection space in the host countries for those refugees who are not yet able to return. We have, for that reason, stepped up our effort for voluntary return for Syrian refugees. As clearly presented by all the previous speakers, making returns and reintegration sustainable requires a comprehensive multi-stakeholder approach and continued support from the international community. Each opportunity to offer refugees a durable solution needs to be used. I thank you, the panelists, for their contribution, but especially for the work you have been doing in this regard. Thank you all for your attention.
Thank you, Ms. Maas, for your closing remarks and for the Netherlands' leadership in advancing sustainable returns. Today's session has brought together communities, government, regional organizations, international financial institutions, the UN, and civil society to discuss how to make return voluntary, safe, dignified, and sustainable, including through addressing root causes and reintegration support. Key messages include the importance of collective action across humanitarian, development, peace actors, reinforcing national ownership and community participation, the critical role of data, predictable financing, and multi-stakeholder partnership, and the value of regional cooperation to address cross-border challenges. Sustainable reintegration goes beyond physical return. It is about restoring rights, rebuilding trust, and enabling returnees to rebuild their lives with dignity and security. On behalf of UNHCR, I thank our speakers, partners, and all participants, and we look forward to continuing this dialogue and turning commitments into measurable progress for communities. With that, we conclude this Spotlight session. Thanks to all for your engagement, and I hand back the floor to the chair.
Well, thank you very much, Assistant High Commissioner.